everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the 5th episode of Nima Voices, a virtual interview series. My name is Soji Kashiwagi and of the Grateful Crane Ensemble. I'm the founder and the executive director. It's a nonprofit theater group based here in Los Angeles, California. For the past 20 years, we've been honoring and remembering our Issei and Nisei ancestors by telling their stories and singing their favorite Japanese and American songs. Along with our work here in the United States, we've also sung favorite songs for earthquake and tsunami survivors in Tohoku, Japan during our goodwill tours in 2014, 2016, and 2018. Before we start the program, I'd like to briefly introduce the Discover Nikkei project and the Nima Voices series. Discover Nikkei is the Japanese American National Museum's international community-based web project with major funding from the Nippon Foundation launched in 2005. The site is in 4 languages, English, Japanese, Spanish, and Portuguese, and shares unique Nikkei stories around the world from the US, Brazil, Peru, Canada, Argentina, Mexico, and other countries around the world. New stories are published daily on the website. Nima are members of the Discover Nikkei online community. Hailing from all over the world, they each bring unique experiences and perspectives to the site's rich archive of stories. Nima Voices is an interview series where we uplift our Nima through brief but enlightening interviews. In this 5th episode, I'll be talking with Japanese-American artist and consultant Jay Horinouchi. Sorry, Jay. Originally from the San Francisco Bay Area in California, Jay was living in Japan when the 2000 Great Tohoku Kanto earthquake occurred. He spent time in Tohoku, 2011 and 12, to assist in post-tsunami recovery efforts. Jay now lives in San Diego, California with his wife, 2 young daughters, and 2 dogs. We'll be reflecting on the 10th anniversary of the earthquake, what it was like, and the different ways in which Nikkei have helped in the recovery. This year also marks the 10th year of Discover Nikkei's Nikkei Chronicles series, an annual theme-based writing project with the overall goal of promoting a more profound understanding of the complex histories and insights of multicultural, multiracial, and multinational people of Japanese descent around the world. Jay has created 7 of 10 Nikkei Chronicles logos for Discover Nikkei, including the most recent one for Nikkei Chronicles 10, Nikkei Generations, Connecting Families and Communities. After my conversation with Jay, I'll ask him some of your questions, so use the YouTube chat feature to ask questions, and I'll get to a few of them at the end of the conversation. We'll be sharing links to the articles we mentioned in the YouTube chat and also in the video description afterward. So now I'd like to introduce to you Jay Horinouchi. How's it going, Jay?
Pretty good, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for joining us today. So let's get started. Let's get started and tell us about your family background and roots.
Sure. Growing up, I had no idea what Nikkei was, Issei, Nisei. My mother's from Tokyo, so she's Issei, and my father is actually 3rd generation. And early on, they actually got separated, and so my mother basically raised my family just by herself. And because of that, she's from Japan, wasn't really connected with the Japanese JA community at all. So when I got older, got into high school and college, that's when I first started to discover what the JA community was, the JA basketball league and all those sort of things. And it blew my mind. It's like, wow, there's so many cool Japanese Americans like myself. And so that was really enlightening. And that's the kind of where I also learned about, for example, like the internment time period during World War II and that kind of stuff. So early on, I was really for me personally, I felt like I wish I knew more about Japanese American culture. But in a way, I think that might have got me more interested into J culture as an adult or as when I got older. But as far as my family, that's kind of the basis of I grew up in a very traditional, kind of a strict, Japanese household.
Mm.
Mhm.
So which city in the Bay Area did you grow up in?
Mountain View,
Mountain View.
California. Yeah,
Hmm.
now famous for Facebook and Google and all those stuff.
Right. So how did you become interested in art, and what made you decide to pursue it as a profession?
I don't know how it got interested. From as far back as I can remember, I was always drawing, doodling, creating things. I was always interested in reading, Japanese manga, comic books. So I feel like it's always been part of my life. Um, uh, during high school, when you start actually thinking about your future more seriously, for me is a natural decision to go into art, or at that time it was graphic design. Um, but as I got into college, that's when you start to learn of the different applications of art and design and illustration and so forth. And then I started to really think about, oh, what do I want to do with art? And that's when I decided, okay, I want to study illustration, actually physically drawing things. And then I transferred from my previous school down to LA to Art Center in Pasadena. And so it was, I always knew I was going to do art, but I didn't know exactly how I was going to use it. But in a way that kind of helped me really explore the different types of mediums and that kind of stuff too. So
Were your parents supportive of you becoming an artist?
very, very.
Mhm.
I think that was really big for me. My mother being a traditional, very, very conservative Christian mother. I looking back, I as a parent now, I would feel she would be like, "Hey, be a doctor, be a dentist, or something like that." But she never pressured me. She never really tried to steer me. Okay, go this way, study science, and blah blah. She always, I think she knew really early on, and she actually really encouraged me to enroll into taking art classes outside of school, signing me up for like remote learning. This is before the internet, so they didn't have online classes. But she got like it's like a correspondence art course where you like draw things and you send it in mail, and it comes back to
Mhm.
you like a week later. And so she really pushed me actually to be an artist, which I think was huge for me because. I'm sure many artists feel the same way. Especially maybe in an Asian community, like you
Mhm.
meet
Mhm.
an uncle, they ask you, "Hey, how you doing? What are you studying in college?" And you say art, and they kind of like, "Huh, oh, cool." It
Right,
kind of
right,
stops there.
right.
So, but I never got that from my parents at all. If anything, it was always support, and that support and love was, I think, really, really important for me.
Oh, cool. So you designed the very first Nikkei Chronicles logo for Itadakimasu, a taste of Nikkei culture. That was followed by designs for Nikkei Plus, Itadakimasu 2, Nikkei Roots, Nikkei Heroes More Than a Game, Nikkei Sports, and finally this year's Nikkei Generations. So, here's some of your work. This is the Itadakimasu, taste of Nikkei culture. And here are some of the other ones. This is Nikkei. Was it Nikkei Plus? Is that what it was?
Nikkei
Yeah.
Plus, yeah.
Itadakimasu 2. What I like about your art is kind of like an explosion happening of different elements coming at you, right? All these different Nikkei Japanese related elements. It's very cool. Very cool.
Thank you. Mhm.
Mhm. So how did you learn about and get involved with Discover Nikkei?
I think it might have been Twitter. I don't remember exactly what event or anything. I think it's just as social media got big, years ago, Twitter, and I was mentioning, I met more Nikkei people like later on in my life. I think I used social media, back then, a lot more to look and seek and discover more about myself as well as Nikkei culture. And I think I stumbled upon, basically Discover Nikkei, and also the Japanese American National Museum. I think that's where it all started. And I started communicating with them, I believe. And I discovered they had events, and for me, I was like, wow, I got to go to these events. And that's where I think I joined in one of them, and I met the current, Discover Nikkei team. And that's kind of, I think, where it all started.
All right. And what have you liked about working on the Chronicles logo specifically?
I've thought about this a lot. It really, whenever, for any type of art, I think any designer or artist, whenever you come up with sketches, or when you create something, you go back to not just visual art, but I think any art, you fall back to your experiences, and what type of visuals that you were drawn to. And so for me, whenever I design these, I would kind of go back to my childhood, not just specific young childhood, but even high school, college. I remember specifically when I first discovered the spam musubi. Growing up, my mother, she's a pescatarian, vegetarian, and so anything pork related was kind of like a taboo at our house. And I remember specifically, I went to a friend's party, like a house party. I think first year freshman college, and it was a Nikkei house. And then they're like, "Hey, have a spam musubi," and I'm like, "Well, what is that?" I mean, I can piece spam and musubi together, but I've never had that before. And I had a bite of that. I'm like, "Oh my goodness! Like, where have you been all my life?" kind of thing. But so things like that, like things that really have a fond memory of me. It jogs my memory. I recall things that were fun, that mean a lot to me, and also kind of in a cliche way, being Nikkei myself, like what visuals can people relate to and associate to, not just Japanese American per se, but South American, Hawaiian, like how can I encompass the Nikkei culture as a whole internationally? So that's been kind of a really fun process. Just what can I do? Every time, and as you mentioned, I've done this I think 7 times, and after a while, like the imagery kind of overlaps. So every year it's like, okay, what can I do differently this year? I think I've put in spam musubi a few times, and I put sakura a few times. So without making it too redundant, how can I keep it refreshed? So that's kind of fun for me. In a way, I can also see like what imagery do I want to make sure my kids how can I embed that into their memory as well? So it's been a fun experience.
Have your kids had spam musubi yet?
I don't think so.
You got to turn them on to it.
Yeah. Well, my eldest daughter, she's 2.5, so she's had California roll, almost regular musubi, and of course rice. I don't think we've introduced spam because it's pretty salty, and we want to hold back on the sodium. But I mean, for sure,
wait a few years.
Yeah, I mean, she's seen me eating it a couple of times, and she's like, "What is that?" And I say, "Oh, it's spicy. You don't want that."
I got it. Okay. So, what have been the challenges in doing these logos? Have there been?
I think the challenge. I kind of mentioned it just a few seconds ago. How do I keep each year looking fresh and not redundant? And again, like going back to the spam analogy, is I love spam, and so I want to use that imagery if it makes sense. Sometimes if it's sports, it doesn't make sense to put it in sports, but how can I put something that is easily recognizable for the overall internet community, at the same time not make it too cheesy or too easy per se. So I try to incorporate some things that aren't that obvious. And hopefully, if someone sees it and say, "Oh, I didn't know that was like Nikkei influence," or makes them want to research it a little bit, I think that's kind of a fun side effect of a design. So,
have you done
go ahead.
research for these objects that you feature?
Sometimes it's more of a research into like how to execute it. So generally, when I would sketch something out, I usually come up with the actual imagery. Like if I want to go back to itadakimasu, for example, I don't remember which one it was exactly, but I just literally just listed my favorite foods that I know are Nikkei influence. So like, poke to spam musubi, tempura, all that kind of stuff. And once I got that down, I would Google it really quick and to see, because obviously, like any family, they prepare it in different ways. So what's the easy way to draw it so that it's easy recognizable, and make it fun visually as well. But that's about it. Yeah.
Is that Lokomoko right there in the center?
Yes.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, so it's very, very Hawaiian influenced. Actually, this image is a good example. So there's two types of spam musubi, depending on where you get it. There's the one where you sandwich the spam, other ones with like a sushi, more like a sushi on top type of sushi type. I love both, and they're both great. One's more portable than the other. But I thought it was fun to incorporate both. So.
Do you have a particular favorite design of all the 7 you've done?
That's a good question. This one might be, Itadakimasu 2 might be one of my more favorite ones. I think the most recent one with the koinobori might be my current favorite, just because I think I visualized, even though one side note is that I didn't know koinobori are for boys, actually, and hinamatsuri is for girls, obviously. I just thought koinobori is for kids, because it kind of makes sense. And so I was actually buying koinobori at Nijiya. I was at Nijiya the other day, and then I was like, "Oh, koinobori, I'm going to put it up this year for my kids." And then I bought it, and my wife's like, "What are you doing? These are for boys. Are you hinting you want a boy?" kind of thing. But I thought it was fun, a cool thing to have in our backyard. So this one, it had more of a personal thing. I was imagining like, how can I make something that's kind of fun for my kids to see, later on. Obviously, right now she won't remember it. But this one specifically, I remember thinking like, yeah, I want to make something that my daughters can see later on. So that was kind of fun for me.
All right, cool. So we have a viewer question from Ruth in Mexico. Jay, how long does it take you to finish a logo?
Good question. Usually it's a mad scramble at the end, just because for various reasons, procrastination to being distracted and busy with other work and stuff. But generally speaking, I think roughly 10 hours or so. But I mean, this is literally from early sketch, so maybe like an hour to sketch it out, and then from there you draw the lines like that, and that's the bulk of the work, the lines, and then once the lines are done, then coloring is relatively easy. So this is, I mean, from start to finish. So in between, you'll have maybe like some brainstorming, and also, like you're saying, some research. I would probably look into Google to see what kind of colors are typical, and to also refresh my memory a little bit. So from start to finish, I think roughly 10 hours or so.
Now, do you do drawing on the computer, or is it on paper, pen and paper, or how do you do that?
Now it's strictly all on computer. It's remarkable what technology can do now. I use an iPad. So I think the last 2 or 3, I don't remember exactly. Last 2 or 3 was almost 100% all on iPad. The years before that, it was all actually pencil pencil sketch, and then I would from there ink sketch, scan that, clean it up in Photoshop, and then use a Wacom pad. Color on the computer. So in a way, maybe it took a little bit longer before. Now I think I've shortened it a little bit just because I've been able to eliminate a couple of steps. But it's also, it's just more out of convenience. It's all in your iPad now, so it's a little bit easier.
All right. So let's turn to when you moved to Japan. You moved to Japan in 2010. And what made you decide to live in Japan? And what was it like for you as a Nikkei expat living in Japan?
That's a good question. It's very interesting. And it was more no real reason, no big reason other than my mother, when she was raising us, she really did a good job at teaching me and my sister Japanese. And most of my all other Japanese American friends didn't speak Japanese or very little. And so I always felt a little bit unique, even among my Japanese American friends that I knew, because I could speak Japanese pretty fluently. Also, my mother I think she felt is important for me not to forget the Japanese culture. So almost every summer she would send me to Japan. I would spend time with my grandparents there. I made friends in Japan. And that was kind of my summer thing to do. I would always go to Japan and just hang out and spend time with my grandparents. And so I think I always had a love for Japan as a country. And in 2010, fast forward a bit, I wasn't married. I didn't own a house. I finished college, and at the time I was a freelance designer, illustrator. And so there's nothing really holding me back. And I just, one day just hit me. I was like, I've always wanted to live in Japan. And if I don't do it now, I think I'll never do it, because once I get married, obviously, or, I could get married in Japan, but I probably wouldn't be able to make a big leap like that down the road. So one day I just thought, okay, I still have my grandparents living there. I could live with them for, a year, half a year, and then find my own place after that. So it was a pretty easy transition, I think, as far as taking the step. Now, I thought I knew Japan as far as living goes and culturally, but definitely when I actually started living there, it was very different. There's a lot of things that you're used to here in America that it's very different in Japan. Obviously, the weather, in Tokyo. I was in Tokyo, but it snows in the wintertime. Summer is excruciatingly hot and humid, and so that really affects the way you get around. You don't have a car, and so in America, at least in California, like when I'm going to an appointment or a meeting, it's like you jump in your car and you just drive really fast and you get there, and you can probably be door to door in 30 minutes. But in Japan, it's like you got to think about walking to the train station, waiting for the train is 30 minutes, and then blah blah blah. So it might be 2 hours. You got to plan your day very efficiently. And yeah, just culturally too, everyone is very nice. At the same time, they can be very cold as well. So I missed that interaction in America. It's like, you get into an elevator or you bump into somebody, random person at the bank or somebody, and you can have a quick, really fun 5-minute talk with somebody here in America. But in Japan, everyone minds their own business, and it's like if you talk to somebody, you're considered a weirdo. So things like that. That having that kind of warmth from strangers was kind of lacking. But that's just the difference in culture. So.
So you were in Tokyo in 2011 when the great Tohoku Kanto earthquake happened on March 11. What was that like for you? Where were you and when it happened, and what was it like?
Yeah, that was probably one of the scariest things I've experienced. Basically, I was in my grandparents' home. I was renting a small room from them upstairs, and very typical Japanese home construction. Very it's all wooden. but they're designed so that they sway with earthquakes, and so in a way it's more resistant to crumbling or something. And so when that earthquake hit, and I remember distinctly, it was a very long earthquake too. And one thing is, this goes back to the earlier question of how is it different? How is Japan and America different? You learn very quickly to tolerate earthquakes. Even before the great earthquake, you have earthquakes very frequently. And so it's just part of life. And so when it first hit, I thought, yeah, it's another earthquake, just let it pass. But it didn't stop, and it got more intense. But
you wrote in your article, Discover Nikkei article, that it went for 5 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah. If I don't remember the exact time, but I remember it was definitely about 5 minutes. And if you'd imagine being shaking for about 5 minutes, it was, yeah.
This was a 9.0, right?
At the epicenter, yes. And I don't know the actual Tokyo, because it's pretty far from the epicenter. But still, like it was a lot of swaying, and so it was pretty scary. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. 5 minutes. That's just, I can't even imagine that. So in the aftermath of the earthquake, you organized fundraising events in Los Angeles and Tokyo, which you wrote about in Discover Nikkei. What inspired you to organize Operation Tomodachi?
I think the main thing was that I wanted to do something, and I just felt so helpless. And the easiest thing for me to do at that time was just go back to my friends who from LA, from all over the place, and use art in a way to both raise awareness about it and to fundraise for it. And so that was just kind of like the easiest thing I can do to do something. And because I was just like itching to do something. And because basically for a week after the first initial earthquake, there was aftershocks still, like every 30 minutes, and everything shut down. And so you're just sitting there, just riding the earthquake still, or aftershocks, and everyone's not working. Everyone's just kind of trying to survive. People are buying up like all the food and toilet paper and water, and so you're itching to do something. And I think, that's just the main inspiration. Yeah.
One of the things that really impressed me with the Japanese people is this concept of otagai-sama, where people just reach out and help one another, even if they don't know each other. It's just part of the culture, part of who they are, of just helping strangers. And that's what really impressed us. And it's one of the reasons why we continue to go back, to support. Really, the spirit of the people really touched us. Did you have a similar kind of experience in working in Tohoku?
Absolutely. I mean, the communities in Tohoku is very different from Tokyo. I think the communities are a lot more close knit. The neighbors are aware of each other. They communicate more often. More often than not, they have a farm on their property, and so one person makes a lot of onions, and they have too much, so they take it over to the next person, and they share that, and then that person's making cucumbers, for example, and then they would share that. So there's a lot of sharing, and so when the disaster would hit, there's just a lot more of that helping spirit in a way. And so going to the volunteer effort was going again, that feeling of not being able to do anything really was so strong. And so I was just browsing Facebook, and then my good friend Akira Uchimura, I don't know if he's watching. Hey Akira, maybe he's watching, but I saw he went up to Tohoku very quickly after the earthquake first happened, and I reached out to him and said, hey, is there anything I can do to help out as well? And so he immediately connected me to his effort, and actually the Nippon Foundation was organizing college students, like a volunteer group with college students, and there's an international college students. And so he asked if I wanted to be one of those leaders for that, and I immediately said yes. And so we started going there and trying to help. But one of the things was, we went there to go help them, but a lot of times they ended up really inspiring us and showing us their resiliency, their spirit of helpfulness. Even though we're the ones outsiders coming in, they were feeding us. They were making sure that we were okay, and just those bonds that we made because of that. You just can't describe it. And so a lot of these students that I took up there, they kept on going back and back, and so we created relationships. And I think even now, there's some former students actually moved to Tohoku. Some of them got married. They're still living in Kisenuma to Miyagi Prefecture. So it was it's very horrible. It's very it's the disaster. I can't even describe it. But the silver lining is a lot of the personal relationships that we made through that. It was so unbelievable.
So it's been 10 years this year. Where do you think they're at? How do you see it at 10 years later?
That's a good question. It seems like, from what I can tell, they have at least gone past the recovery side of things. I do know, from a political standpoint and also a complete recovery standpoint, I think you'll never recover from such a devastating thing, because cities and boundaries were redrawn because of this disaster. So things that used to be there are not there anymore, for example. And there's still people missing, and so people are never going to recover fully. But also not just the tsunami itself, but a lot of these communities were in a way shrinking communities even before the tsunami. So the tsunami in a way exasperated that and made the shrinking much more apparent. So in a way, they were able to see what do we need to do to recover as an economy. And this is a deeper conversation, but seeing that firsthand and being aware of that made the community kind of come together. So I know that there a lot of good things have happened since, and I know it's already 10 years, but it seems like there still needs to, we can't forget about that. And so it's a difficult question, but from what I can see, my friends are doing well, and I think it's important not to forget about it.
Yeah, it's important not to forget about the people too that we met.
Yeah, absolutely.
So along with our work in Tohoku, another thing that I share in common with you, Jay, is that we're both from the San Francisco Bay Area in California. And over the past year, with the pandemic, there's been a steep rise in anti-Asian hate and racism across the country and in our Bay Area hometowns. So what has been your reaction to this, and how has it affected you as someone from the Bay Area and as an artist?
That's a hard question. I think maybe, racism, especially against Asians, maybe already, not already, it's always been there, maybe. I definitely had experienced it during high school, especially. But, you would hope that we'd get past that. And so seeing it on the news and seeing the videos, YouTubes on the news, it's shocking. It's very disappointing. I think one of the most important things to combat that is because I think a lot about that. Like my kids, my oldest daughter is 2 years old. When they grow up, I really hope we can create a world for them that's safer, and we can eliminate racism and anti-Asian hate a lot more efficiently by then. But I think it's just also just communication with not just within the Asian communities, but outside the Asian communities. What's true, what are facts, what are not facts. I think COVID was a good example of how disinformation and untrue things can hurt people, because that really would something that's untrue. And someone believes that that could hurt somebody, and regardless of the intentions or not, I think it's really important to think about others before you share something that can be like a conspiracy or something. It definitely, words can't hurt people, I believe. So just having an open mind and communicating, also checking in with your community, taking care of each other, and just being nice to each other. I think that's such an important thing. It's such a simple concept, but it's important.
We're going to go to some rapid fire questions real quick. Who is your Nikkei hero?
George Takei, but that's very easy. Naomi Osaka, I think she's doing some awesome things because she's so young. Yeah.
Okay. So what is your favorite Japanese Nikkei food?
I was going to say spam musubi, but that's a little bit too easy. Probably, sushi, poke, the raw stuff. Yep.
And what about what is the Japanese value that most influenced you growing up?
Oh, man. That's a hard one. But being a parent now, I think mottainai is definitely up there. Because, when I'm feeding my kids now, it's like, they say, I want to eat a pancake. You make a pancake and they don't want to eat it. It's like mottainai. And it's like, as a parent, words have so much more meaning now. So.
And what do you like most about Discover Nikkei?
I mean, for sure, the community. Otherwise, I wouldn't be connected to so many people. I've made new friends through Discover Nikkei. I wouldn't be doing this without Discover Nikkei. Like even just simple things of knowing that there's Nikkei all over the world. That to me, that having that community and being connected is such an important thing for me, and something that I can pass on to my kids. So
great. A question from a viewer, Laura. What is your favorite part about being able to design these logos for Discover Nikkei?
I think just sharing, in a way, I'm sharing my personal experience to the world. And again, like I was saying, I hate to sound redundant, but being able to make something that my kids can see later, and hopefully they can have some fond memories of that. That to me, it means so much to me now.
All right. So we're just about ready to wrap up. So remember to check out Jay's Nikkei Chronicles designs and articles on Discover Nikkei, which you could find in the live chat or the video description. Discover Nikkei is accepting submissions for Nikkei Generations, connecting families and communities through September 30th. Stories are being published on a rolling basis, so don't wait until the deadline to send yours in. Go to 5dn.org/generations for more information. You can also start reading the stories submitted so far and be sure to vote for your favorites. 5 stories will be selected to be featured and translated into other site languages. All right, do you have anything coming up that you'd like to talk about? Projects, upcoming work?
Not immediately, but I'll keep you posted.
Okay. So for Grateful Crane, we're taking a nostalgic journey back in this summer with our Kenjin-kai Picnic Obento fundraiser to take place on Saturday, August 16th, 2021. If you're interested in ordering, please send us an email at gratefulcrane@gmail.com. All right, so Discover Nikkei. Oh, there's the bento from Chef John Nishio. He's a friend of ours that he'll be preparing the obento. It looks kind of familiar. It looks like itadakimasu, definitely, except no spam musubi. Oh, well. So Discover Nikkei has more virtual programs planned. Tune in for episode 6 of Nima Voices on Tuesday, September 7th. Guest host Emily Anderson, a project curator at JANM, will be talking with Christine Piper, a mixed-race Japanese-Australian award-winning author, about the history and communities of Japanese in Australia. Check Discover Nikkei for updates. And please send Discover Nikkei your feedback and suggestions for future episodes and programs. They'd also love to share your stories on Discover Nikkei too. Contact them at editor@discovernikkei.org. So it looks like that's it for this episode of Nima Voices. Let's thank our special guest, Jay Horinouchi. Thank you, Jay. Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you all for joining us today. Until next time, take care, and thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.